So this is a wild and crazy story about an actual horrible thing that happened on the Appalachian Trail near Dismal Creek in Virginia back in 2008. It starts with this guy named Ricky Williams who was camped out on the trail, and he had his dog with him, and he kind of ran out of supplies, and he was getting a little hungry, and he ran out of bait, and he just so happened to run into this guy that's fishing too, Scott Johnston, and he said, "Hey man, you got any extra food?" He says, "Well, yeah, here's a vitamin bar or something like that," and he says, "And here's an extra little bait too." And he gave him some bait, and they actually started catching fish, both of them. And then later on, when he started to depart, he said, Johnson said, "Hey, why don't you come up here to my tent, and we can have a fish fry, and you're welcome to join us." I said, "Hey, I like that." So he went up there with Scott, and they went up to the camp, and there was another guy with Scott called Sean Farmer, which was with him as well. And he kind of looks at, "Who's this?" He says, "Oh, he's just a guy that having a little troubles, and let's try to help him out just a little bit here. He's been fishing with me." And he says, "Okay, yeah, we got plenty." And they had two vehicles up there, a Jeep and a truck. Sean and Scott did, and and they fixed all this food, and they ate it all up, and it's like, yeah, man, this is great. And at this time, they were feeling like they didn't really feel threatened by this guy because he was like skinny and just real frail, like he hadn't had any food. They kind of felt sorry for him, Ricky. And so Ricky said, "Hey, we're going to part our ways, and I'll go back to my tent, and thank you," or like that. And then as he got up, there was this big bang. Um, so later that afternoon, there was these people that lived down at the bottom of the hill in a house. They heard this Jeep come crashing down, and the guy got out and said, "Oh God, call 911. We don't know what this guy's up to." And he kind of come to the door and said, "Hey, I need some help. I need some help really bad." And they said, "Well, okay." They opened the door, and he was bleeding out of his neck. He's just spurting blood out. Like, what the heck? So called 911, and they got the 911 came out there, and they actually saved him. In the meantime, he had said Dismal Creek, Dismal, because he was just really couldn't speak a lot. So the police thought they'd investigate Dismal Creek area. They knew where the campsite kind of were, so they went up there, and they started, as they were going up there on this road, they saw this truck barreling down, and they said, "What the heck?" And like, what's he gonna do? And the truck saw them, and it kind of slammed on its brakes and turned and actually crashed into the woods. Had a bad wreck. I said, "What the heck was that for?" He kind of acted like he's trying to get away from us. So they, took this guy to the hospital and said, "Let's with him and make sure that there's nothing wrong here because it just seems suspicious. So let's keep a police officer with them." In the meantime, they went back up and found this camp, and it was like a shaggy old camp with old stuff on it. It had like 80 knives and underwear and pants and belts and all kinds of collectibles all over the place. And it had another map that had like X spots all over the trail areas. Like, what are these X spots for? Somebody buried there that killed somebody they didn't know. And they kept digging through stuff. So this looks like a serial killer or something do this. And then finally they found some identification. And when they saw it, their eyes looked at each other. "Oh shit, this dude here is Randall Lee." They all knew him, Randall Lee Smith. This is the guy that had actually murdered brutally two people back in 1981 in the same area, in the same spot. And he was put in jail, but he got out early. He only spent 15 years. And then after probation, he went back out here again, and here he was. And what had happened was he claimed to be Ricky, but he wasn't Ricky. He was Randall Lee Smith. So when he was at the camp with Scott and Sean, he actually pulled out his gun, and he actually shot them. He shot Sean first a few times, and Sean, fell on the ground, and then Scott actually took off running for the Jeep, and he shot him in the neck. So that's where he got that neck wound. And when he was driving down trying to get away, Sean actually managed to get up and run away as well. I mean, he'd been shot, but he still like had adrenaline, said, I've got to get out of here. So he ran away, and as he was stumbling down the hill and the road, uh, Scott was driving the Jeep, said, hey man, get in, let's get out of here. So they flew down, and that was the Jeep that went down to the bottom of the house where the lady was, and that was Scott that actually went to the door, was bleeding to death. And Sean was in the Jeep, but he was too weak to actually walk. But they did get him too and take him to the hospital. And then that's when the police said, well, you ran Lee Smith to Ricky Williams. And they said, well, I did it in self-defense, though. I had to do it in self-defense. They were going to kill me. So he claimed that, but he was really weak. He'd been really hurt bad. And actually, later on, he died from a blood clot. So they didn't really know any more information about what was this map, what was all the stuff in his camp that he collected. Was this from dead people that he'd found and killed? They didn't really know, and they still don't know today, really. They did try to test a lot of things, and they didn't find any clues, and they went to some of the spots where the X's were and checked all those out, and they didn't really find any clues, so nobody really knows. But as far as Scott and Sean, they survived this fine, and they still go to Dismal Creek and camp out there all the time, even now after all that happened. Crazy story.